Hello, pardon the interruption, but I'm just here to quickly tell you about the 2025 Escape Collective Spring Classics Summit. Not sure if I said that in the right order, but anyway. We did our trip to the Classics last year and it was such a hoot that we're doing it all over again this year. Well, I hope I'm going, because it would be a bit harsh to get me to read the ad for it and then leave me at home. Anyway, the trip includes a cobbles masterclass with Johan Museo. You can ride the Paris-Roubaix Challenge, you can watch the women's race from the grandstand inside the actual Roubaix velodrome, and then for the men's race, head out onto the cobbles to get covered in the mud and dust of the peloton as they race past mere inches away from your actual face. There are also cultural trips to Ypres, Bruges and Flanders Field, and our very own Dane Cash does a great history tour that isn't to be missed. In the evening, we're all usually about having beers and hanging out, so come and join for that. And if you're lucky, you may even get to see Ian Treloar try and give himself the Heimlich manoeuvre after choking on a kebab. Go to escapecollective.com/summit to book your place, and don't wait because fewer than half of the spots are still remaining. Hello, welcome back to the Spin Cycle podcast. As you'll notice, this is not Kaylee's voice. He is off to Washington on this inauguration day to bend the knee. No, he's just off for another one of America's numerous public holidays. MLK Day today. Fun fact, America has 11 public holidays and the UK only has 8, so that doesn't seem fair. And I think when we have our end of year appraisals, I will be bringing that up. Anyway, with me on the show today, in Kaylee's absence, Ronan McLaughlin. Hello.
Hello. I kind of feel like we're a bunch of kids without an adult.
Yeah. Keys to the
That's
castle.
always the delight of these ones. Yeah, you never know what can happen. And starting with a little American politics joke, definitely caught Abby Mickey by surprise. Abby, how are you?
I read that in the show notes, but I thought you were making just a joke in the show notes. I didn't know you were going to say it out loud.
Always say it out loud. That's part of my problem. And Kit Nicholson back again.
Hello, and I'm in Scotland where we have 9 public holidays. Not
You get an
England's
extra
8.
one.
Yeah.
Ah, damn it. Anyway, today on the show, Jonas Vingegaard says other teams have been using carbon monoxide for performance gains. The Visma-Lease bike control van is no more. So sad. And we have Matt Denise on the ground at the Tour Down Under. And Ineos Grenadiers are on a sponsor hunt. Let's get to it. Okay, in the little bit there between the intro and this block, we've discovered that Andorra has 14 public holidays and Ireland has 10, for anyone keeping count at home. But what I'm keeping count on is that Jonas Vingegaard has come out and said that while his team uses carbon monoxide for testing, he has effectively accused other teams of using it for performance gains, which, if you'll remember from Ronan's reporting last summer, was one of the reasons we went so deep into the story, is because this was a concern. So I'm just going to pass over to Ronan now to ask for his take, ask if he feels vindicated after a lot of people put him up for a fair bit of criticism over his reporting, which now is having a 2-time Tour de France winner back in it. So Ronan,
I think the correct answer here, Jonny, is that it's not about me.
Yes, that is true. But I thought I'd give the context before you give your take.
That's the correct answer. I think the frustrating thing here is I'm not even going to single out Visma-Lease bike, Jonas Vingegaard, anybody here, but sort of the flip-flopping that we've seen in a lot of the reaction to that piece last summer on the use of carbon monoxide. And as we spoke about countless times before, the difference between there being a legitimate medical and measurement use case for breathing carbon monoxide and then there being the potential for performance enhancing use of carbon monoxide. And like my opinion on this hasn't changed for as long as we're talking about the sport that we're talking about and the history that this sport has and the individuals who are still involved in this sport. Then the ease and the temptation of which you could switch from measuring to performance enhancing is all too simple at the moment. And so you wrote about before Christmas the UCI are going to seek a ban on the performance enhancing aspect of it. And while that may be difficult to police and may not be the ultimate solution, it's a step in the right direction. And I think Jonas Vingegaard coming out with these comments. Whether he has evidence of that or not, I don't know. But or if he's merely deflecting attention, I don't know. But again, it's another step in the right direction, I think.
So to read the full quote from Jonas, which was given to Le Monde in an interview, Jonas says, some teams are misusing its use by regularly inhaling low doses of carbon monoxide, which causes a significant gain in performance in their riders. This is not fair and the World Anti-Doping Agency should ban it. What do we think's prompted this coming out at the training camp and to give this interview? I mean, his press officer basically tried to stop him, Le Monde says, like mid giving this answer, which I guess is what any good press officer would do. But Vingegaard felt strongly enough to continue, upon this course, which, will bring some more attention to him. Like you just said, Ronan, just because he's saying something doesn't necessarily make it true. So then he knows that he's inviting this on himself. Do we think this is going to help bring about a ban on it? Do we think this is going to add anything more? I think it's a pretty significant step that we've had like such a prominent rider from one of the teams that you reported on using it come out and say this. I mean, UAE have stopped using it completely as well. So it feels like there's a lot of things going on behind the scenes which we're not privy to.
Well, they're leading the way now at this point. I mean, not leading. I mean, they're not in charge, but by Jonas Vingegaard presenting this subject and pursuing it of apparently his own accord puts him on the front foot, and and the questions would then be less accusatory, when he inevitably turns up at races and gets asked these questions. And the same with, appearing to, I'm not suggesting that UAE are lying, but showing that action is being taken I don't know. It's positive, I think. And I'm not saying that I believe that the sport is clean. I'm not saying that I do or don't believe anyone wholeheartedly. I do have an optimistic outlook on the sport in its current form, more so than in the past. And otherwise, I don't think I'd be following it.
Yeah.
If this sort of thing was rife, then there would be it'd be hard to follow. But yeah, I feel like. I mean, I was very surprised to see that Jonas Vingegaard had said these comments, but the more I thought about it, it made a lot of sense because, he now puts himself on the right side of it.
Well, and the surprising thing to me is that the only teams that, we've heard of that use this are Visma, UAE, and Israel Premier Tech. So by Jonas Vingegaard coming out and saying other teams are doing this, and without, naming the teams, which also would be a mad thing to do anyway, because you're going to get yourself in all sorts of bother there. But it kind of feels, or a lot of people will feel that he's then pointing the finger in the direction of the other ones. Even, there's no evidence to say that, but that is what he's doing a bit.
I think you're getting back to what I was talking about there earlier, Jonny, with like when I mentioned flip-flopping. And if I take a second to explain what I mean about, like when I say that, is that when we initially started asking questions about carbon monoxide rebreathing, carbon monoxide inhaling for performance enhancing, what we initially got from Visma-Lease bike was a no when asked do they use this rebreathing machine. Then during the tour we got a yes, and then we also got from Visma and from UAE an explanation as to why they use carbon monoxide rebreathing, which is the measurement technique, and the explanation was that they use that before and after altitude training camps to measure the effectiveness of the camp. And we were told by UAE specifically that was actually trying to remember the exact phrasing that was used, but that was the responsible approach to take because it ensured rider health and it allowed them to measure the response of an altitude training camp. Then, fast forward a few months and we are told by Visma that they're no longer going to be using the measurement technique because they no longer had access to the device, given that the study they were partaking in had finished. We were told by UAE that they would no longer be doing the rebreathing measurement also. And then you're left wondering, well, what is true here? Is it the responsible thing to do, or is it a useless thing to do? And both can't really be true. And as such, again, I think it's a step in the right direction. It's a good thing that a prominent writer like Jonas Vingegaard is shining a spotlight on the use of carbon monoxide for performance enhancing. And those are comments, those are conversations that wouldn't have happened without the reporting that we did last summer. And again, with it being a substance that is not only undetectable, but is not even banned at the moment, and the practice of inhaling carbon monoxide for performance enhancing is not banned either. At the moment, those conversations are really the only safeguard we have against riders being tempted to abuse this. And if this was 12 months ago, none of us knew that carbon monoxide could be used for performance enhancing, and as such, without the public knowing, riders could be sitting at home tempted to attempt such practices. I'm not saying that happened, but so long as this conversation isn't happening in public, the temptation and the idea that you could do this without being caught exists. And unfortunately, this is not something you can mess about with. More carbon monoxide does not mean better performance. It means dead. And so it's again, I think it's just a very important conversation to be had, and I think it's incredibly important that riders like Vingegaard come out and make these comments, because let's give him the benefit of the doubt. If he's going to say something like this, he's surely not going to be doing carbon monoxide behind closed doors.
And then just reminded me when we were doing the reporting on it, and then I had a Visma spokesperson after the article was published calling your reporting mendacious. And so it's like, well, so what is it? Should we ban? Yeah, great choice of word. I've used it so much since I learned it that day. So what is it? Are we trying to ban it? Is reporting about it mendacious? It's hard. I guess maybe we're holding too high an account people and their choice of words, but that's kind of it's kind of part of the game and the job. Should we move on? Oh no,
maybe just one final pointer is just like the Ditalo device that Israel and Visma-Lease bike were using or are using or whatever. I don't know where they sit at the moment. I think Israel Premier Tech have said that they will still use it. That device is, as far as we understand it, has like a safeguard built into it where it's like it can be monitored by the developers of that device, and any malicious use or any nefarious use, is that maybe the better term?
That's a good word.
Yeah, could be identified. And as such, you would there's theoretically, at least there's a safeguard in place there that, at least in terms of using that device, these teams couldn't have used it for performance enhancing, which we mentioned at the time, but seemed to go unnoticed.
You know what? It's water under the bridge. A bridge upon which a Visma-Lease bike control van will no longer be sitting at any Tour de France stage this summer because it's been decommissioned. Kit, you wrote about this over the weekend.
Well, I didn't realise that it was even really still a thing, but basically they've really put it to bed now, because they turned up for background, turned up at the Tour de France with an extra vehicle in what must be one of the largest convoys in the convoy for a team. They're an enormous team with a lot of money, so they turned up with this extra van wrapped in the special edition design, and inside it was like one of those spy surveillance vans. It's just exactly what it is, in fact. But that would be a mobile control center, where I think the idea was that there would be a coach and a data analyst sitting in the back, watching video footage, live footage. Looking at rider data, which a lot of it they wouldn't be allowed to use in race, as we covered at the time, because that's against regulations. But they turned up before the Tour de France with this big old van. Probably partly due to everyone going, hey, hang on a minute, what's this? Including us and a bunch of other teams. The UCI opened an investigation, and then very quickly, almost before we could hit publish on the news that they were opening an investigation, they banned it. And I didn't really hear much more about it, except for Jonny Vorta's brilliant quotes about, well, we're doing it from the sofa at home, because that's where the internet is better. It's also takes a lot less budget. So anyway, over the winter, they've evaluated it and decided actually it's unnecessary.
If they took that Visma-Lease bike van and the mattresses that they banned Richie Porte from using in when he wanted to bring a car and combined the two, you could get
that's a better use of resources.
You could get a YouTube video on making a camper van at home.
I love that. I love those YouTube videos. They're so soothing, aren't they? As opposed to,
and some lighthearted behind the scenes for videos would do that team pretty good value, I reckon.
Another one to just edit Sepp Kuss out of completely and pretend he doesn't exist. They
could make Sepp Kuss sleep on it.
He could drive between stages. It did seem a bit preposterous, especially when they released screenshots showing just like a Twitter feed, and it was like, do we really need to have a van with a satellite on top? Is this the most short-lived gimmick we've ever seen in pro cycling? What do you think Richard Plugger's got?
Well, it was short-lived originally.
Yeah, that's true.
It's dragged a bit.
Yeah, they probably could have gotten away without having to announce its decommissioning.
Yeah, they probably could have, yeah.
It's kind of ridiculous that a team that has been to the Tour de France multiple times and would know the Wi-Fi / service situation at many of the tour stages
It's
would
absurd.
think that this was a good idea without realizing ahead of time that just having a team somewhere where there's reliable Wi-Fi at all times would be a better decision.
It's crazy.
Yeah. And they are moving it back. They're moving it to their I think they called it a control center.
I need to see this control center.
Team HQ in Den Bosch.
I need to see it.
Yeah, it's basically a big office building because that makes more sense. Data, there's absolutely nothing you can't do.
Yeah.
I mean, the only thing about being in the convoy is potentially, I don't know, getting on the radio if there isn't mobile signal, but they wouldn't be a crucial race vehicle, so they'd be a long way behind the peloton and quite possibly out of range.
But if there's no radio signal, there's probably also
Yeah.
no Wi-Fi signal. So.
Yeah, so it beggars belief. I don't know where it came from, whose idea it was. It's just an extra. Maybe they just have a van lying around and wanted to do something with it. Put Benji Nason in something.
Does anybody else suspect this might have been a marketing gimmick at the time, and it's
Have we got done again?
Bringing it up again this week might be another opportunity to
Well,
extract some more marketing value from it.
We're eating out of the bin.
Both weekend lead stories on Daily News were Visma related.
I do have a useful use case for the van,
Oh, yeah.
though, if it has been decommissioned, because it's obviously set up for people to work in the back of it, and so they could just sell it to either the ASO or the or the UCI, who could then park it at the side of the road and have it work like one of those police speed camera detection vans, and they could, if the peloton's going too fast, they could like post fines out to riders. Weeks
Yellow
after
card
that
out the window.
happens.
But that's the other thing. Can you imagine anything worse? And looking at the picture of the van, the seats are facing backwards. Can you imagine anything worse than trying to analyse data when you're going down switchbacks in the Alps?
I was assuming they would be pulled up at the side of the road. I didn't think it'd be on the
think
go
they'd be
in
stopped,
between like petrol stations, but I like that.
But you've got 2 people in the back and 2 seats in the front. No, it's a van. There'll probably be 3 seats in the front. But it's just, I mean, there are so
Kit,
many.
you've been sucked back into thinking this was actually a thing. Remember, this was not actually a thing, and so what direction the seats were facing doesn't matter.
I just love to imagine the ludicrousy. The ludicrousy?
Yeah,
Is that a word?
go for it.
I don't know.
It is now.
Just imagining. I don't know. We know that this team is one of the most professional in the sport, or we assume it, and yet sometimes we just get some harebrained ideas. It's
well, I'm just going to contradict myself, because I do think there would have been value in it, and what actually happened here was a whole lot of other teams who couldn't access the same value, rather than preparing for the following year to have the same themselves. They've just turned around and cried foul. And
so, like what though, Ronan?
You're putting me on the spot now. Like
Well, I
what,
assume you
as
had
in terms of value?
Examples. Yeah. So what value would they have in the van?
Well, I mean, it comes back to like the old saying: if you can't measure it, you can't improve it. And so, while I don't know exactly what they would have been analyzing or measuring or monitoring, the presumably with the advances in terms of AI. I can't believe I just said with advancements in AI. But,
Escape Collective's market cap has gone through the roof with that sentence.
Big data analytics, and I can throw all the corporate stuff at you if you want, but there may well be trends that could be identified that maybe, like, I don't know. There's smarter people than me that work at Visma-Lease bike.
Why you could do it in the hotel? You could do it in an office in Den Bosch. You could do it in this little hole in the middle of my building.
They should lease that place from you. Lease a kit spare room.
Lisa
Kit closet.
Lisa cave. Lisa closet. Yeah.
Would it potentially have something to do with the staff members inside the van who are doing this analysis during the day also being on site?
Yeah, they want to be on the Tour de France
in the morning.
They want to be on the ground.
Yeah, I don't know. They could, I mean, I hate doing this, but I do it all the time, so I'm going to do it anyway. Like, if you take the Formula One example, they have. We
should get a bell for each time you say
on
that.
the ground.
Drink.
Yeah.
They have analysts on the ground at every race, and they have strategic meetings and all sorts of engineers meetings, after every session and before every session. But they also have a team back at base, and they have a lot more data to comb through and a lot more that they can do with it. But it's not unreasonable to think that there's some value in having that in a cycling team.
Well, maybe they, in keeping with the surveillance van idea, maybe they wanted to have those analysts on site so that they could speak face to face rather than sending messages and getting hacked by other teams who might steal their ideas.
That'd be exciting.
There we go. I've been watching some spy TV lately. Can you tell?
I thought you were watching Formula 1.
I'm just imagining how annoyed the riders would be if after every stage and then they debrief the tactics and then they get massages and they eat and there's always the really long transfers and then before bed they have to go into like a meeting with everybody with the van people to talk about analyzing the numbers and how just like that would be the worst thing ever right before bed after a night.
They're dragged into the van to read mean tweets about themselves that have been sent during the day.
The whole team converges into the van.
Abby, you've just cracked it. It was nothing to do with the data. It was nothing to do with the analysis. It was all to do with improved sleep.
Yeah.
Just getting the riders to sleep quicker.
Well, there we have it. I mean, after Richard Plugger lied about the French teams having beers and then this whole control room thing, I'm excited for what he's going to cook up in 2025.
Oh, yeah.
That's probably enough of Visma Corner. We'll take a quick break, and then when we come back, we're going to talk some Tour Down Under. So, Women's Tour Down Under finished. Well, probably a lot of us were asleep. Naomi Rugg, am I pronouncing it right? Won the Noemi. Okay, won the race. Good race. Few different winners. Abby, would you like to sort of give us your big takeaways from the race?
I would love to, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention that Matt Denif was on the ground at the race and caught up with Gracie Elvin and Georgie Howe and recorded a phenomenal podcast that will be out tomorrow.
Nice.
If you're listening to this on the Monday, I just edited it and it's very good. So highly recommend heading over to Wheel Talk and listening to that. But my biggest takeaways from the race is probably the peloton is confused. We always have some weird tactics this early in the season, like first World Tour race of the year. You never really know who's on form until you're literally on the road. But we also had some insane transfers over the off season. So I think the peloton will need to adjust a little bit to the new normal. And we saw that a bit during the race. For example, during the first stage, we had a doomed solo move by Danique Hengeveld of Certeza WNT. And that move never should have succeeded. But a lot of teams were looking at each other. Top teams like FDJ Suez, who had one of the favorites to win the stage, and Ali Willison just didn't do anything. Liv Alula-Jaco as well. Like they also could have had a really good shot at winning the stage, and they did nothing. So we saw big teams that, could have done more and ended up walking away from the race with nothing, gambling and losing, which is not something we will see later in the season, hopefully. But because it's the first World Tour race of the year and people don't know their form and teams don't really know how other teams are going to handle race situations, we saw, a surprise winner on the first stage already with Danique. And I mean, it was an amazing win and she's obviously really strong, but it just never should have happened in a World Tour race with, the likes of FDJ Suez, who are kind of the new super team. They were there and they will have, gotten nothing out of the race because of situations like that. I think that's probably my biggest takeaway. I mean, just watching the race also, seeing the likes of Elise Chabi and FDJ Suez kit threw me off the entire 3 stages.
It's a funny time,
Yeah, so it's just a weird time of year, and it was raced like that. But it was also, Noemi Rugg, she went into last season and won one of the first races that EFO Lee Cannondale did last year with one of the Mallorca Challenge one days. And going into this race, I texted the Wheel Talk team before stage 1 and I was like, Noemi's my pick to win a stage.
Nice. Hey.
Yeah. Cause she goes into the season really strong. And I think she just doubled down on that at this race and is really like a huge rider to watch. But I also think, like taking into account everything we watched over 3 stages and looking forward to the rest of the season, it doesn't mean anything. Nothing we saw over the first 3 days of the World Tour, Women's World Tour in 2025 means anything, because it's so early in the year and there's so many big riders and big teams missing from this race, that it's 3 amazing days of racing. And of course, like, Danique got her first World Tour win. Noemi got a huge win. Chloe Dygert opened up her season with a victory. But I don't think there's really much that we can take away from that, because it's January and the tactics are weird. The teams are weird. The form is weird. A lot of the favorites that we thought were going to dominate the second stage were, up and about, but didn't get any results. So
January. I like that. The Tour Down Under powered by nihilism. I think it's got a ring to it. You've actually ticked off all 4 of the points I was going to bring up there, Abby. So that is some nice, concise podcasting. Kit,
she's a pro.
A pro's pro. Any surprises you didn't expect from the race? Anything that sort of woke you up? Well, you're already awake in the middle of the night watching the race, presumably. Anything that woke you up more to be like, wow, didn't expect that?
Oh, I didn't stay up to watch the race at 1:30 a.m.
No, neither. That would be mad. That would be...
I'm 9 months pregnant, John.
Oh, I forgot. I was kind of fast forwarding a few weeks to when like the baby was here, and then you would be up in the night. That would have actually been. The UCI should have thought about that. So inconsiderate. Sorry. When you're watching it back on replay, anything that stood out?
I think one of my biggest surprises was the second and third stages. I mean, we saw the first stage was supposed to be a sprint, and multiple factors meant that it wasn't. But the second stage was meant to be quite challenging with 2 laps up Wollonga Hill, and it's only the second year the women's TDU has ever done Wollonga. And last year we saw Sarah Gigante just absolutely blow the peloton to pieces on 1 ascent of Wollonga, and this year they did 2. So you would think logically, okay, it's going to be a much harder race. But in the end, Niamh Fisher-Black, newly decked out in her primary colors of Little Trek, said after the stage that it wasn't hard enough for the likes of her and Amanda Spratt, 2 of the best climbers in the peloton, to have an advantage on the climb, which is one of the reasons that Noemi was able to take that stage in the overall. But I think it just goes to show that just because you look at a course and you think it looks harder doesn't mean that the peloton is going to race it that way. So I was surprised about that. I was surprised we didn't see more action on that stage. I was surprised it came back together. A lot of that was also down to a tailwind. And I was really surprised at how passive the peloton raced the third stage. I was quite disappointed in the third stage, actually. Like, that was the stage I was most excited to watch, with the technicality of the roads and the variability of the circuit. And I just love a circuit race. But the peloton just didn't really do anything, and the gaps weren't that big. So there was a lot of teams that kind of dropped the ball on the final stage, and I guess I just kind of expected more from both of those stages.
Yeah. You alluded to earlier about, teams not necessarily getting what they would have wanted out of the race. I mean, who specifically are you looking at to... It's not like there's going to be pressure this early stage, you said, but who's on the long flight home being like, well, could have got more out of those 2 huge flights?
I think 3 teams in particular stand out to me as teams that are walking away from this first race having come away with very little. Little Trek, for one, they were really present on the second stage. But between Amanda Spratt and Niamh Fisher-Black, you couldn't really tell who they were working for. And in the end, that just meant that Spratty had a better ride on Wollonga, but they didn't get any results out of it. And FDJ Suez, as I said, like, they are a super team now. They have one of the best teams in the peloton, and they came away with absolutely nothing from the race. And that'll be really disappointing for them. And AG Insurance Soudal, who won 2 stages of last year's race and the overall with Sarah, and they came away with nothing as well. And they would have had, new signing Alexandra Manley, who would have wanted to have a really good race, her hometown in Adelaide, and they didn't have a good race at all. So I think those are kind of the 3 that stand out.
Nice. It's got me excited. It's just nice to like flick onto YouTube and see like a 6-minute highlight thing of bike racing on roads. It just makes you remember that
Under the sun.
Well, not that much. Like that, when I see that, I get a bit annoyed, to be honest, and jealous.
Yeah.
Like when we're going to throw to Matt in a minute when he's saying about how hot it is, and I, granted, 37 degrees probably not that fun, but also freezing temperatures also not that fun. Kit, you spotted something, a first at the Tour Down Under.
First for this season, yeah. So, the first yellow card has been handed
Shocking.
down.
It might be the first yellow card in the women's peloton as well.
No, they got the first yellow card ever. It was Barbara Garishi on stage 2 of the Tour de France.
Good memory, Kit. Christ.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. No, I wrote the story the weekend, so I. But yeah, it's So it was the sports director who passed too closely, past a group, while going to attend to Mir Bjornedal Otterstad. Nice. I'm sorry if I'm messing up the name. X Pro Cycling, X Mobility rider, sorry. And this was on stage 2, so she was on her way to finishing 3rd up Wollonga Hill, and then ultimately she wrapped up 3rd overall. So yeah, first yellow card, and that means a 200 Swiss franc fine, and the yellow card, which means that if she got a second yellow card in the same race, she'd be ejected and given a 7-day suspension. But it also factors for the foreseeable future, because the infractions mount up. It's a yellow card. Everyone understands that concept. The infraction levels are different, and the within one race is obviously a big deal. And there was a little bit in the original reporting done by Cycling News, who were on the ground and asking. Yeah, so sports director Anna Bardegruber, she seemed like she wasn't quite sure on the clarity of the sanction at the time, but the quotes that she gave, so it's easy to read the quotes with a cynical eye, because it seems like she's complaining, to be perfectly frank, and yet in her complaint she perfectly encapsulates the whole purpose of a yellow card. Would you like to hear it?
Yes, please.
It would be super stressful, for sure, with moving in the cars or feeding anything. Now you probably have a little bit more on your mind. Am I doing everything right? Is it correct? Is it not? Which rules apply? In the end, it's racing. We know what we are doing.
Right. Okay.
So she was on alert, which is as the whole point is. Yeah. There are issues with the yellow card system. Joe wrote a great piece when 4 of the Decathlon AG2R riders got yellow cards at the Vuelta last year. If you remember when Carapaz fell off his bike after some blocking by AG2R at the front of the peloton. It starts to get a little bit ropey when whole teams are just been given yellow cards, because anyway. Joe wrote some analysis back in what would it have been September. But yeah, it's interesting. It's the we're in the second phase of the testing, beginning of 2025. Yeah, so yellow cards and sprint zones have been successfully tick-boxed, successfully implemented, and they'll continue to make amendments, and they've added a couple of extra infractions to the list that can be given yellow cards. There are other things that are being added to and rescinded. They're not quite so worried about earpieces, at least the number of them. Okay. But yeah, I can see Ronan is desperate to make a point.
I'm desperate because you said successfully, and I'm just wondering what part of it was successful and which part of it has just been rammed down our throats.
Right, yeah. So yeah, you're right. Successful was the wrong word. I did a lot of reading about this yesterday. I'm slightly exhausted
fun Sundays,
by it. So I was trying to pass the UCI's update from their SafeR project, which I didn't know was meant to be a kind of weird abbreviation of safe road cycling, which makes the name even worse in my opinion. But anyway,
well, it's also just a reminder that they only care about road cycling, which
it made me wonder if there's going to be a safe for mountain biking or a safe for gravel. Anyway, let's pull ourselves together for a second. The update, I was trying to make sense of it, and I know you've tried to make sense of it too, Ronan. There's a lot of chat, it feels a little bit like they're burying themselves under data, and there's stuff that is happening, and these quotes, this case study alone seems to be, this is what they want. They want people to be paying attention. That in the updates, that it's like you said last season when we were talking about safety towards the off season. There's so much that can be done right now that doesn't need several years of testing.
When I read the SAFER report last week, it just struck me like, here's a load of data.
Exactly.
There is no indication whether this proves anything that's been done is right, wrong, or making any difference whatsoever, but we're going to keep doing it. And like there was information on crashes, and like the largest percentage of crashes was attributed to rider error. And I'm like,
yes, and the second largest number of crashes was not mentioned at all.
Yeah, but also no explanation
missing.
of how do we determine what is rider error. Can you give us some examples of what you have determined to be rider error? Again, on radio earpieces, they mentioned that they did this trial. They mentioned that there were findings, and then they just like moved on. And it seemed to me like an admission of, yeah, we can't do that now, but they didn't want to actually say, yeah, we can't ban radios. And it's like there's just so many. Like the whole report had more questions than answers, I thought.
Yeah, and we're going to focus on how they used to communicate, because that's it seems like a cop out, or it's like trying to be right when they're actually wrong.
Yeah, I think the latter.
I've got a burning question to ask. I've been stewing on for 5 minutes. How many more yellow cards does the DS who got one have to accrue at other races before they get suspended? Is that an obvious thing, or
how long have you got? I mean, I can find.
Yeah,
there's a
but maybe
graphic.
that proves it. That proves it if it's
Okay, if you get 3 yellow cards within a 30-day period, you get a 14-day suspension.
Okay.
If you get 6 yellow cards within a 1-year period, you get a 30-day suspension. It actually doesn't seem like anyway. 6 yellow cards is a lot. It doesn't. There must be more to it than that.
I'd say if you get 6 yellow cards, you're a bold person.
Well, you get 6 yellow cards, you're on Visma-Lease bike and you don't care.
Yeah, I was going to say, or you're what's the one sprinter who's all over the shop?
Name no names.
Jasper Philipson.
Abu Jabrov.
All of them.
Who's that? They sound fun.
Abu Jabrov. Yeah, you need to go back and watch 1990s Tour de France.
Sorry, wasn't alive.
Famous for sprinting with his head down.
Oh, okay.
That sounds safe.
Yeah. We nicely developed that conversation from the Tour Down Under to the Safe R
You're not supposed to pat yourself on the
developments.
back like that, Johnny.
I was patting you guys on the back and then taking a little bit of credit, but what I was trying to do was bring us back to the TDU, because I'm now going to throw to a conversation I had earlier today with Matt Deneef, who's on the ground in Australia, as we've mentioned, who gave me all sorts of insights into the women's race, what's coming up with the men's Tour Down Under, and about Luke Plapp, the farmer. So let's hear from Matt. Matt Deneef, you're in Australia at the Tour Down Under. How are you?
Jonny, hello. Thanks so much for having me on. I'm doing great. I'm here in Adelaide at the Tour Down Under. We've just had 3 days of the women's race. We've got a bit of a rest day of sorts today before the men's race kicks off tomorrow for 6 stages in and around Adelaide.
We've just heard from Abby who's given us, the sort of nuts and bolts of what went down at the women's Tour Down Under. But, what was it like on the ground? Give us some, local flavour, the stuff that we wouldn't have seen on TV if, people were even awake for the race. Because, to be honest, it's pretty inconsiderate of you guys to do the one race of the year you have in appropriate hours for Australia.
Yeah, sorry about that. Very selfish of us. I think one of the main things has just been the heat. And you would have seen some of that on TV if you're watching the coverage. You could have seen the riders reacting to the heat with ice vests and water bottles over their head, that kind of thing. But I think just being here, you get a sense of just how stifling it is for the riders. I know I was spending as much time in the shade as I could, and even getting out for a ride in the morning before the stages has been pretty oppressive here. So I don't envy the riders at all. I ended up walking up Wollonga Hill the morning before the women's stage and to see a race that was happening up there beforehand. And I can tell you that was incredibly hot, just walking up it. So the idea of racing up it twice, no thanks. A lot of the riders, particularly the Euro riders who hadn't done the appropriate heat training, certainly were feeling the effects of that heat, having to go up Wollonga twice. And then same on the Stirling stage, on the final stage. As Abby would have mentioned, it's a really tough circuit, a lot of climbing, no real respite. And so tough circuit in that heat was just incredibly sapping, and we saw big gaps by the end of the day. And I think that sort of heat is one of the reasons why we expect Australian riders, New Zealand riders to do well, because, they've been home for Christmas, they've been acclimating to the conditions here. whereas a lot of the riders, that are coming to the race are coming from freezing temperatures in Europe and haven't necessarily done the training. So to see Noemi Rugg win the race when she decided to stay in Switzerland for the entirety of her winter was very impressive. And hearing how she, spent an hour a day training in her bathroom with a winter jacket on and, a beanie to try and sweat as much as she could, pretty impressive dedication for the first race of the year, middle of January. So that was pretty cool to see. And I don't think anyone would have predicted having an all-European podium by the end of the tour and, in a race in January in Australia. That was pretty unexpected.
Yeah, for sure. I can confirm it is freezing cold over here. So try and enjoy the heat while it lasts. As you mentioned, you're now on to the men's race, and you spoke about Naomi really preparing this winter and targeting this race. Do you get any sense of who's potentially got a similar approach to the men's race, or maybe even some riders who you're looking forward to watching race who may be turning up with a point to prove?
Yeah, I think the defending champion, Stevie Williams, is one to watch. I mean, on paper, he's a guy that he's coming from winter as well, so he shouldn't be in great form. But we saw last year when he won that he'd done the preparation and came out here in great form. So he's made it very clear he wants to win again, and it'll be really interesting to see how he goes, particularly given that we've got Jay Vine here this year, who won the previous edition when there wasn't Wollonga Hill in the tour. So that's back in this year for the men, and that will really suit Jay. So I think that's a really interesting one to keep an eye on. Luke Plapp as well is one that, is a fascinating story. We had a press conference today, and Geraint Thomas was joking that some of the riders have been calling him Mr. January because he just gives everything to be right for the Aussie summer. And, I was interviewing him today, and he just talks about how much he loves the Aussie summer of racing and being in form for these races. And he had a horrible crash here last year that meant he didn't finish the race. So he's coming back with a point to prove, and in a year where he really wants to focus on becoming more of a GC rider, he wants to go top 10 in the Grand Tour with a goal to being top 5 next year and then hopefully on a podium the year after. So a big year for him and a big race to try and win at home for the local Aussie team. I think he's definitely one to watch, and it'll be fascinating to see how he goes in a pretty strong field.
I mean, that's kind of what you want, isn't it, from, your nation's riders at the national races? You want them to target it. You'd want them to forget for a second that there are races like the Giro or the Tour or whatever coming up. You want, that it will lift the crowds that come there to see them at, the pointy end of the races. I mean, does Luke Plapp feel that back? Is he cherished in that way by the fans?
Oh, absolutely. And I think he earned himself a lot of extra fans a couple of weeks ago at the Aussie Nationals. For those that didn't see that, you should go and check out the highlights from that race. But basically, he helped Luke Durbridge to win the race, and in doing so gave up what would have been a history-making 4th win in a row to help Luke over the line in his hometown. So I think he's really endeared himself to the Aussie fans, even more so in the last few weeks, and he'll have a lot of support out on these roads. But it's an interesting one with the Aussie riders because it is obviously their home race. They want to do well here, and for Jayco Alula in particular, it's really important for them to do well at home. But as you say, it's such a long season, and this is such a small race in the grand scheme of things, if we're completely honest with ourselves, that for those riders like Plapp and like Jay Vine and like Neve Bradbury in the women's race that we just saw, they want to do well here, but they also need to be at their absolute best at bigger races. And so there's a real fine line between being good enough, but also not being so good that they then can't reach those peaks later in the season in the races that matter more. So yeah, it's a curious one, and I know they want to do well, and we'll see how they go. But tricky balance for them to get right.
Final thing on the Luke Plapp press conference, did you or anyone else get to the bottom of the conspiracy theory that he actually gifted Durbridge the national champs because he wanted to wear this new map jersey? Has anyone asked him that question yet?
Well, I actually got to speak to him one-on-one, so he wasn't actually part of the press conference today. So,
wow, okay.
I managed to pull him aside for 15 minutes where we talked about his hobby farm, which was exciting. If you haven't seen him on Instagram, he's got a hobby farm about 3 hours north of Melbourne, where he goes and wears his cowboy hat and his cowboy boots and plays farmer when he's not racing bikes. It's well worth a look. He's got some Highland cows there that he plays with. It's good wholesome content. I think he must just love the purple kit. Yeah, I think that must be it. He didn't confirm or deny that specifically. I must ask him during the week, but I did ask him whether it was weird rocking up to the national champs not wearing, rocking up to TDU not wearing national champs kit, because this is the first year in his career that he's done that. In 4 years of being a pro, he's never raced in a not national champs kit on the road. So yeah, he said it was a bit weird, but was really happy to see Durbo in that kit, which does look good on him. And he had white shorts the other day, which
I love it.
I'm a fan of. I know that's polarizing for some people, but white kit, white shorts, big fan.
Love it. Well, yeah, if you do find the chance to ask him about that kit question, maybe we can chuck it in a future episode or something like that. But no worries if you want to maintain, an air of professionalism that we don't usually have on this podcast. So I'll leave that in your court.
I spent 10 minutes talking about a farm with him, so I'm sure I've got a bit of leeway to play with some weird questions.
That's true. Well, Matt, have a good week in Australia, and I hope the racing's great, and looking forward to reading all your pieces up on the site.
Thanks, Jonny. Good to chat.
Okay, a few little bits of housekeeping and news. First thing is I have to offer a corrections corner, because still on the Remco Reflex, I said that you have to pull off the entire rectangular thing. Apparently, there's you can actually get the tiny little Remco out. Someone messaged me, so that's my heartfelt bad once again for that error. Now onto the little news bits. This piqued our interest towards the end of last week after recording Friday's episode. The Ineos Grenadiers are looking for an extra sponsor going forward, because Ineos are not providing any further cash to elevate them to, the level of Visma or UAE super teams. Abby and Ronan have both raised their hands with things they are desperate to say. So, I mean, who's going first? Abby?
Does it have anything to do with the recent rumors that Caleb Ewan might be going to Ineos Grenadiers and they're looking for a little bit of extra? Because who's got the money to hire that guy in January of a new season?
I haven't seen that. I love that.
I like it.
Not
Just
sure
dropping
how
bombs
that would
on
go
you,
down.
Jonny.
Yeah, blimey. This is what happens when we record before, 1 p.m. I'm still catching up with the things you've already taken and digested. More concerning to me is the idea that there's no more money for the cycling team from Jim Ratcliffe, whereas on the footballing side of things, Jim Ratcliffe's other sort of, cratering sporting ambition, they're paying striker Anthony 200 grand a week to do not very much. And then
200 grand a week?
A week, Abby. Wrong sport, am I right?
Sickening.
Come on, Toms, kick a ball.
Kick a ball.
I mean that's the wild thing. Extra money not coming from Jim. He's forcing John Allett to go out with his bag open.
Is he, or is it just like, it struck me like every headline I read about this and everything I seen about it was just like, it was a roundabout way of saying Ineos Grenadiers for sale. It was like the worst ever Facebook Marketplace ad.
Do you think?
Two careful owners.
One not as careful as the other.
Dropped once.
I don't know. Wow. I don't know if it's for sale, but it was just like such a stark contrast to what we know of this team for its entire existence. It was like, money, that's not a thing we even think about. And now it's like, we need another sponsor. In January, on the eve of a new season, when they're trying to like already turn a getaway ship or something. I don't know.
They just have an expiration date on them, don't they?
Yeah, it's for sale with some signs of wear. It's they need some revitalized. Oh Jesus, words.
Lightly used. Cosmetic updates needed. Structural
MOT overdue.
Yeah. These are some excellent verbal memes, guys. We really hit the third block of this podcast running. I mean, how out of 10, how concerned are you for the existence of Ineos Grenadiers?
I was 7, and I think after seeing that on Friday, whatever it was, it immediately jumped to 9.9 out of 10.
9.9. Blimey. Well,
0.999.
crikey. Okay, high. I'm going to have to, maybe Jim Ratcliffe's finally had enough. So it'd be sad.
It'd be very bad for British.
We'd have nothing
British
left.
cycling if they, there'd be, anyway, that would be, they need a change though, don't they? They need something.
Yeah.
And having a bored boss is not a good thing.
Never.
A real study could be made of that team through the years.
Yeah.
And how they did things and how they fell
Well, they've created
so
their own
rapidly
monster,
from
haven't
grace. Yeah.
They've created their own, they've dug a hole for themselves, and they've now got...
And then climbed into it, and now they're kind of like scraping the dirt
Disgusting.
on top of themselves.
Yeah.
When you say they dug this hole for themselves, Kip, what I think we should specify exactly what you mean, because it's a great point.
Yeah, so they were the first big super team. They had the Death Star and a vast amount of money. And obviously they dominated the Tour de France for several years. But then other teams, in order to compete, had to find a way. So they increased their budgets. They invested in more nutrition and technology and riders. But then they overtook Ineos as riders aged, as staff changed, as sponsorship and investors changed. And now they have got. They are not the top team by any stretch. In fact, they might not even be in the top 3.
No. Well, they did a similar thing with the British scene, some people have told me, where suddenly all the British domestic teams wanted to turn up with the buses and people were throwing money in, and it all became not too big to fail, because it did fail. It became, overbearing, and it just it wasn't sustainable.
Too big to sustain.
Too big to sustain. Yeah. That's much better. But yeah, we'll keep an eye on this, see if we hear any whispers, but it's never good. It's never good news. Speaking of losing shine, a segue provided to me and written down in the show notes by Abby Mickey just now, which is fantastic. The Paris Olympic medals kit. That's another.
Oh yeah,
it's another story.
Well,
weekend.
This isn't news.
No,
this was news that was first trickling out of the Olympic Village during the Olympics. That especially the gold medals, I think the gold and bronze medals were literally flaking away before they'd even got on the flights home. So that, and if I remember correctly, I should have looked this up, but if I remember correctly, the French Mint, whoever was making the medals, which, if you remember, they all had a piece of the Eiffel Tower within them. But if I remember correctly, they remade a whole bunch of Paralympic medals because they'd been made in the same process in the same batch, so we're surely going to have the same issues. So a lot of the Paralympians have got medals that stood the test of time, but yeah, I mean, there are athletes who are keeping them behind lock and key for fear that they're just going to keep getting damaged.
Can you imagine being the first athlete to discover your medal was deteriorated, and you'd be like, "Oh shit, what have I done? I've broken my gold medal.
So what's wrong with my sweat?"
And now it turns out that actually they hadn't been putting gold in it. Whoever was making them was pocketing the gold and just painting.
Well, it also did. What was interesting at the time was you remind me of something in that it brought up at the time a bit on the manufacturing process, and obviously, I mean, I think everyone over the age of 6 would understand that the medals are not actually solid gold.
What? What?
Oh, okay.
You're joking.
No, they're I can't remember what's beneath the layering, but it's they are facsimiles of gold medals.
Wow.
They look pretty good. I mean, they were some nicely designed medals, I thought. But yeah, I mean, very quickly, they look tarnished. They look like the gold is flaking away and exposing what looks kind of like pewter, kind of a dull greyish color underneath. Yeah, it's not good. So they are having to remake a whole load more again.
I wonder if Tom's golden brick that he just won is worth more than an Olympic gold medal
that.
In terms of just value of the actual item.
Probably.
And not what goes behind it.
What was that for?
Congratulations, Abby? Tom's, by the way. That's an awesome feat.
Yeah, just a little drop in there.
No, what was it? I saw the thing, but I just saw the photo. What was it? What was it for?
He won the Latvian Athlete of the Year for 2024, which is all athletes across all sports.
Wow.
Probably one of the most prestigious athletic awards you can get in Latvia. So it was a pretty big deal. And the
Love
first
it.
road cyclist to ever get it.
Love it. Congrats to Toms. That is great news. That's I think let's end the regular show on that lovely positive note. Abby, thank you for joining. This may be the last time we see you on this podcast for a while.
Probably for a bit, yeah.
Well, thank you very much for joining us once again.
Thank you. Thank you for letting me.
Always welcome. And the feedback we get when you're on the show is they want more of you. So that bodes well for the rest of us. Ronan
well, it's
McLaughlin.
only fun when I can like jump in and like make fun of Kaylee and then just
That's true. We haven't.
Time.
I thank you for not making fun of me.
Yeah.
I was apprehensive.
How did this stand up?
Never coming back. Ronan, thank you once again for joining, for offering your insights.
Most welcome, Jonny. Anytime.
And we are going to call on you for a very short After Dark in a minute. But first, I've got to thank Kit Nicholson, always there, always on the show, keeping it
in my closet, in my little hole.
See, I feel like my setup now is trying to compete with that, but it's just not got the same
need to put some
allure.
ugly wallpaper behind me.
Yeah, I'm glad I got my headphones on, so no one else had that. Otherwise, I would be in trouble. Right, thank you all very much for listening. Sign up to become a member of Escape Collective. If you haven't already, escapecollective.com/member. We're now going to go to After Dark, where finally we're going to hear what Ronan saw at the UAE team hotel.
Finally,
so,
this has been teased for ages.
It's been teased for so long.
Jonny, it's not dark here yet.
No, it's not. We're going to have to pretend.
We're going to have to wait for a while longer.
Right. To all the regular listeners, goodbye. Members, see you in After Dark. Ads ruining your favourite cycling podcast? Sick of shallow bike reviews? Escape Collective is different. We deliver the content you crave without the distractions. We're member supported, and that means ad-free podcasts, independent and honest reporting, and real conversations within a passionate community. It's a better way to experience cycling media. Join us at escapecollective.com/join.